Thank you.
And we're live. Take us away, Paul.
Good morning, everyone. This is Paul Beyer from GAI Insights, and welcome to our daily rating of Enterprise GenAI News, where our team of AI analysts rate articles as essential, important, or optional for the time-starved and overwhelmed AI leader and their team. Today's session will be moderated by David.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Good morning. Good day, everybody. So we have some interesting pieces to discuss today. Another gaffe from someone putting ChatGPT out in the wild. We got some articles related to healthcare and a data poisoning tool that is now available. So we're going to start with the first article about the innovation happening in GPUs. And we'll start with Tim. What were your thoughts on this? I think you're on mute, Tim.
Yes, I love technology. This is optional for me. It's very interesting. You know, I'm a propeller head, so if you're a propeller head, you have time, I'd read it. It is interesting where things are going. Everybody's been talking about Moore's Law. The title's a little misleading. It's not really about energy. Energy is a driver because it's true that the amount of energy being consumed by uses related to generative AI is enormous. But there's also just a general push to figure out how to get to the next level of computing. Quantum computing is what's on the tip of everybody's tongue, but it's actually not clear how long that's going to take or even if it will get here. So this is about a few other types of thermal uses of silicon and there's even one other. They're just basically new ways of computing that don't use standard silicon transistor architecture. Very interesting, could revolutionize things, but they're very early and haven't been used in production yet. So interesting. A general trend may be important, as we've said sometimes, for the general trend of new types of computer chip architectures.
All right, so we got optional. Any arguments against or further comments? Lots of optionals. All right, we'll quickly move on to the next article. What do we have next, Ankaj?
Okay, the next one is from DPD, a coded company. So they have been using a chatbot, but they made some updates. I'm assuming they started using GenAI for their chatbot, and the chatbot started swearing at customers.
Yes, this was the talk of social media this weekend. Paul, what are your thoughts here?
We've seen this before. This is optional, in my view. We've seen the lawyer who just took the thing and gave it to court. We saw the Chevy dealership. I think this idea that we had all these chatbots before Gen AI that were unassisted and we didn't worry about quality, and now we're just upgrading it is silly. I think we got to continue to educate leaders that unassisted AI is different than human in the loop. And this is a good example of unassisted AI with not a lot of testing. And I think things like what Tim was going through last week with one of the companies we're talking about are starting to think through ways to monitor swearing. Things like that are doable. It's just that this company chose not to invest in it. So I think it's optional. I think the other thing I just highlight is this AI notion that, hey, we are now in the world where we have to do zero work. All we do is the robots can do 100% of all the work with 100% accuracy and not a lot of design is also naive, and it's not where we are today. So optional in my view.
I agree. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, certainly optional for me, but I chuckled when I read it.
Yes, and the person that made this happen, the headlines of this kind of cracked me up because they acted like the bot just swore at the customer out of nowhere, but you could see his prompts, and he was definitely working the bot to get it to do deviant things.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think you can contrast this. I don't know if we'll get time to talk about it, but there was an article about Amazon's mobile chatbot, which won't even discuss another product. So you can ask questions about a product. and they've got it reined into the point where you can't even ask it about another product. So you can make these things work closer to the way you want. You just have to put the effort in.
Absolutely. Okay, optional for this one. What's next?
Okay, the next one is from the field of science. So generative AI is helping explain human memory and imagination. So slightly technical one.
Yeah, so this probably gets an F for fascinating. But Tim, what are your thoughts? I know you're
Yeah.
interested by this.
Really intriguing. Those of us with as much gray hair as me know that, in fact, one of the main reasons AI was started was this, to help explain human cognition. And this is really interesting, but look, it's a research study, it's a university paper, really interesting if you're interested in this space. Not particularly relevant, so optional.
John, are you talking? I see your mouth moving, but I think you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think the fascinating thing about this, to me, the whole analogy of brain equals mind, just because you can mimic certain things that people do, is kind of silly. We have very, very coarse ideas of how the brain works. I mean, there may be all kinds of stuff going on, like quantum effects that we can't measure, and just anyway, it continues to amaze me how simplistic people are when they make brain to computer analogies. I mean, it's back to the analogy we talked about, which is, birds fly, planes fly, but man, birds do a whole bunch of stuff that planes don't do, and vice versa. And then, I don't know why we need to constantly be going back, other than be inspired by it. But whatever.
Yes. Interesting. I mean, there's definitely been I feel like a lot of articles lately about the advances that are being made in understanding the brain thanks to computers, and so it's definitely interesting, but probably not relevant to an AI leader. So we'll go optional.
Yes.
All right. What's next?
David, excuse me, I just want to interrupt that our longtime listener, Michael Novak's also agreeing with optional. Good morning, Michael.
All right, we are validated. Okay, next article.
Yeah, the next one is from Nuance AI. So it's a clinical scribe. It's now integrating with Epic, which was acquired by Microsoft, and it is being rolled out in more than 150 health systems now.
Yeah, Akash, I think that the language is ambiguous. I think Nuance was acquired by Microsoft, not Epic.
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah. And so Epic still is privately held. Judy, I forget her last name. Pardon me?
Judy, yes. I don't know her last name either.
Yeah.
Judy.
But she, anyway, yeah, to me, it's optional, but man, this is another reason to buy Microsoft stock. I mean, my goodness, right? Epic is the gorilla in the space. As I mentioned on our last call, I was talking to a brand new chief operating officer of a private equity held electronic health record company that's pretty well used. And this issue of capturing ambient clinical notes and then turning into, DRGs and then get paid off those DRGs is one of the top 3 things they're using AI for in as he's driving that company forward. So I think this is a big deal, but I would say optional.
Judy Faulkner is
Thank
his
you.
name.
Yeah, Judy Faulkner. Anyway, I could argue for important here because this is a general availability of the #1 EHR in healthcare. I mean, the Epic is the dominant player, and this is like the McDonald's thing we did last month. This is a major production release. It's administrative, so again, they've taken it out of clinical diagnosis and care. It's just quote unquote administrative, but it's quite important, as you said, John. And the fact that it's in production, I think, is a pretty big deal. So it's a great use case. It's a simple one. It's doing summarization. I think in healthcare, there's an even more valuable case, which is mediation. We're debate that on my Substack newsletter. But I think this is also an important one, just the ability for the doctor and the patient to talk to each other and not have to worry about taking the notes into a computer like Epic into an EHR. Big deal. And I think it's a big deal that it's been generally released again, because this is such a large company and this is critical. This is healthcare. Even though it's administrative, it's still healthcare.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree with Tim. It is important, I think, because it's not that it will be in 150,000 hospitals and healthcare institutions, but it's available, and eventually it will be. And it is a use case where they've tested. It's about 50% improvement or fast or speed in getting these summaries. So it's an important test case for the executives to hear about.
Okay, I'm hearing a couple importance. Paul, I see you about to jump in.
Yeah, and I'm just curious. I mean, we're so obsessed with our arcane healthcare system in the United States. Does anyone know by chance, is this being rolled out 5 years ago in other countries? I remember Jose at our conference was going through what they did in Portugal, which was so far ahead of the States. So I'm curious.
Well, generative AI wasn't available 5 years ago. So something like this wasn't being rolled out 5 years ago. The main things that the other countries do much better than the United States is aggregate and population data management. So in the United States, Epic has Epic and Cerner has Cerner and eClinicalWorks has eClinicalWorks, and there's a million other EHRs. It's still very difficult to get population level information. And if you want to control healthcare costs, that's what it's about. It's about managing the entire population, not about individuals. At the end of the day, cost is about aggregation. So they're much better at that.
Yeah. So make sure I understand, Tim. So this is an advanced of kind of voice to text note taking.
Correct.
That was around before GenAI.
It's been big in the medical field for a long time.
Yeah.
Because doctors could dictate notes and things with it for a long time. The difference here is that they're doing it as ambiently, which means it's in the background while the doctor and the patient are interacting. If you've been to the doctor in the last decade since EHRs have been installed, the doctor is usually looking at a computer because he's taking notes into the electronic healthcare record while he's talking to you. He or she, I should say, the doctor is talking to you. And that is a big impediment both to the patient and the doctor. So the biggest issue here is actually the reconnection of the doctor and the patient in the conversation. And the second biggest is lack of burnout, because the doctors and the clerks and everybody in the healthcare system spends most of their time entering information into these systems rather than caring for patients.
All right, so I think we're important. I'm going to just move us along a little, but I'm going to share one thing that I have not seen in the news, so maybe I'm breaking this story for others. I actually received a letter on Friday. I use MyChart by Epic. I don't know if anyone else here uses that with their doctor. Yes.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere.
It was hacked for the Yale New Haven Hospital System, which is a giant system here in Connecticut. And my and many other patients' personal health data is now out somewhere in the wild. So I'm kind of surprised I didn't hear this on the news. It seems like the kind of thing that people would report. So they've kept it quiet, but that's problematic.
David, just one real footnote to that. My wife worked at an adoption agency for 5 years, and they faxed over medical records frequently. It was stunning how many times that the incorrect medical records were faxed over. Maybe 10% of the time. So I think it's very porous how all this information is kept about us and shared.
Yes. Little disheartening. All right. So I think we're going with important on that one, and we will move on to the next piece, which also is health related, but slightly different.
Yeah. So the next one is from WHO. So they have released guidelines for multimodal GenAI in healthcare. And it sort of resonates with recommendations in other sectors.
I'd vote for optional on this. The thing that bothers me about these models is that, I mean, first of all, it's nice, and it's a bunch of things that you'd expect, right? Don't kill people, don't hallucinate, things like that. The thing that bothers me about these is they don't talk enough about access. There's a little bit in here about data sets that, to make things available, but I think a lot of these things need to, and we talked before about the new Second Amendment, right? The right to bear AI. I mean, I think we need to give more access to people, not just frameworks.
Yeah, optional for me. I think the biggest problem with developing standards up front is it hardly ever works. If you look at standards that have actually stuck, they're usually done from practice, not from theory. So this is how things run. This is what we need to regulate. And we just don't have, I think, enough data yet. So what happens is you get these, as we say in the United States, motherhood and apple pie statements. Don't be evil.
Tim, that was really well stated. And Michael's also noting online no penalties. But,
right. No teeth. Okay, we'll go with optional on this one, and we'll go to the very last article. And Luda, we'll have you start us off on this one once we hear from Ankaja Wout.
Okay.
What it's about.
Yep. So Nightshade is a new free tool that sort of poisons AI models which generate images so that other models can't read data or can't read the right data from those images.
Yeah, as the article is written, it's written about artists that can protect their assets. And I think for our audience, it might be optional, but for the general use in, say, marketing arena, where you would like to not get other bots to use your marketing assets, I would put it as important. So I'm interested in other people's opinions as always.
I was thinking important on this one, and I'll tell you it was because of one passage, and I didn't realize this about this tool when I think we talked about it when we first heard that it was coming out. It says an AI model that ends up training on many images altered or shaded with the Nightshade tool would likely erroneously categorize objects going forward for all users of that model, even in images that had not been shaded with Nightshade. So to me, that seems something that an AI leader would want to know, that models may be kind of going a little awry if anybody starts using this tool in earnest. I don't know what others' reactions are to that.
Well, yes and no. Again, these models are statistical. So the key phrase is enough shaded images. So
Right.
there has to be a statistical dominance by the shaded images in order to confuse it. But this has been known for a long time in image recognition. I worked in some areas I can't talk about, let's say, publicly for the government slightly in my career. But the things I can talk about is we knew 10 years ago, you could change 4 bits in a picture that showed a stop sign and turn it into a cat. 4 bits out of tens of millions of bits, right? So this idea of poisoning images has been around for a long time. And the other thing to remember that the training data for most of these folks is random, I'll avoid the expletives, random stuff from lots of places. So they're training on lots of lousy data at one level right now, and they're pretty darn good. So you have to worry about this. This is, again, where, yes, an AI leader, I would rate this important because an AI leader needs to understand at this level what's going on, because it could be important. But the reality is there's lots of lousy stuff going into the training of these models, and they're coming out pretty good. So the model makers know what they're doing in order to correct against it. This is a tougher problem. And it could, this is about images, but it could get into language models as well. But this is the general kind of security problem with models, which is there's always adversaries out there. So to the other side of what Luda was saying is adversaries can use this too.
Right.
And so this is going to be the classic arms race with these models.
Yeah, I think one way to think about it is MIS budgets usually spend about 10% on security, roughly speaking. I think that generative AI is going to, and AI in general, is going to take that percentage up to 15 or 20. So you're going to have productivity on one hand, but the relative amount of your technology budget you need to spend on security, I think, is going to go up. and it may as much as double, be my guess.
Okay, it sounds like we've shifted to important. Is everyone comfortable with that? All right, I think that was our last one for today. So we had two important pieces, this one, as well as the release of the Nuance tool. And that's a wrap for today. We'll see everybody tomorrow morning. Thanks, guys.